The crystal chandeliers shimmered above as I made final adjustments to the table settings for my in-laws' 40th anniversary party. Everything had to be flawless. Victoria Thompson wouldn't accept anything less in her cherished family home, the same mansion where she'd been threatening to kick me out for 3 years. Emily. Victoria's sharp voice sliced through the room. Those aren't the right champagne glasses. How many times do I have to remind you that we use Waterford crystal for special occasions? I maintained a neutral expression as I swapped out the glasses. Of course, Victoria, my mistake. Classic Emily, my sister-in-law Amanda scoffed from the doorway, still clueless about proper etiquette after 3 years of marriage. Once a waitress, always a waitress. I thought about the property deed hidden safely in my office and grinned. Let them relish their feeling of superiority for just a little longer. 3 years ago, when their precious son, David, brought home a waitress instead of the society woman they'd envisioned for him, the Thompsons made their disdain very clear. Victoria had called me a gold digger at our engagement party. Amanda spread rumors that I was pregnant and trying to trap David. Even David's father, Richard, had insisted on a prenuptial agreement that would leave me with nothing if we ever divorced. What they didn't know was that while I worked as a waitress at a high-end restaurant, I was also secretly building an empire. My small hobby of buying and flipping properties had grown into a multi-million-dollar real estate business, carefully concealed under multiple layers of companies and LLCs. The tips I saved from waitressing have funded my first purchase, a foreclosed condo that I renovated and sold for 3 times the original price. David knew about my success, of course. He'd watched me grow my business from scratch and supported my decision to continue waitressing even when I no longer needed to. Let them underestimate you, he'd said. They'll see eventually. Tonight was going to be eventually. Emily, Victoria called again. Where are the place cards? Don't tell me you forgot to pick them up from the calligrapher. I handed her the hand-lettered cards from a silver box. Here they are, Victoria. She snatched them from my hands, inspecting each card with a critical eye. At least you didn't ruin these. Still, I don't understand why David insisted you help plan this party. It's a family event. Yes, Amanda added, adjusting a flower arrangement I had spent an hour perfecting. Family only, but I suppose David felt sorry for you since you don't have any real family of your own. The remark about being orphaned, my parents died in a car accident when I was 12, and I was raised by my grandmother, who passed away just before I met David, would have stung 3 years ago. Now, it was just another item to add to my mental list of debts waiting to be repaid. By 6 o'clock, the guests started arriving, old money, and even older names. I played my part perfectly, the humble wife, grateful to be included, slightly out of place among all the wealth and sophistication. Victoria and Amanda basked in their perceived superiority, exchanging knowing glances every time I used the wrong fork or made some imagined mistake. David, ever the protective husband, kept a reassuring arm around me. He knew exactly what was coming. We had planned this moment carefully. After dinner, Victoria stood to give her speech. She had just enough champagne to loosen her tongue, but not enough to make her words slur. Richard and I are so fortunate, she began, to have created this legacy together. This house has been in the Thompson family for 3 generations. Our children grew up here, and God willing, our grandchildren will too. She paused and shot me a pointed look, another jab at my lack of children so far. Family is everything to us, she went on, though sometimes family can be weakened by unfortunate additions. Another glance in my direction, but the Thompson bloodline remains strong, and this house will always belong to true Thompsons. I met David's gaze, and he gave a slight nod. Actually, Victoria, I said, standing up from my seat, I have something to mention about the house. Sit down, Amanda hissed, her voice dripping with disdain. No one wants to hear from the help. I opened my clutch and pulled out an envelope. 6 months ago, when the bank started foreclosure proceedings due to some poor investment choices, I glanced at Richard, who now looked very pale. Someone bought this house. Victoria froze, her champagne glass halfway to her mouth. What nonsense are you spouting? Richard handled that situation. No, Victoria, Richard tried to handle it. He begged every bank in town for a loan. But his credit was shot, and the Thompson family name doesn't have the weight it once did. The room fell into a heavy silence. Even the servers had stopped moving, their attention fully on the unfolding drama. Luckily, I continued pulling the property deed from the envelope. A real estate investment firm called Phoenix Properties stepped in. They bought the house for cash and allowed the Thompson family to continue living here under a very generous lease agreement. Richard's face shifted from pale to a deep gray. He knew what was coming. Phoenix Properties, I said with a smile, is owned by me. The silence broke as Victoria's champagne glass shattered on the floor. That's impossible, Amanda shrieked. You're just a waitress. You can't even afford designer clothes without David's money. Actually, David interjected. I've been wearing the designer clothes Emily buys me for the past 2 years. My trust fund ran out a long time ago. Bad investments seem to run in the family. I handed out copies of the property deed to the shocked guests. I've enjoyed watching you play Lady of the Manor, Victoria, but I think it's time we discuss some changes to the living arrangements, starting with those Waterford crystal glasses you love so much. Victoria swayed unsteadily on her feet. Richard, do something. But Richard was staring at the deed, his face turning ashen. Recognition was setting in. He had seen the paperwork before and had signed the lease agreement himself. He just hadn't known who owned Phoenix Properties. You? He looked at me with a mix of disbelief and dawning understanding. You were the buyer. All this time. All this time, I confirmed. While you were calling me a gold digger, I was signing the checks that kept you from bankruptcy. While you were mocking my waitress past, I was adding to my property portfolio. And while you were threatening to kick me out of the family mansion, I smiled. I was legally becoming your landlord. Amanda lunged for the deed in my hands, but David stepped in front of her. Careful, sis. That's no way to treat your landlady. Victoria finally found her voice. This is ridiculous. We'll fight this. Our lawyers will. Your lawyers, I interrupted calmly, are already on my payroll. Who do you think handled the purchase? Would you like their number? It's listed on a lease agreement you signed without reading. The room erupted into chaos after that. Amanda stormed out, slamming doors behind her. Victoria had to be helped to her room, alternately crying and making threats. Richard sat silently, staring into space, perhaps calculating how much power the Thompsons have lost in one night. As the guests left, whispering among themselves, I began collecting the Waterford crystal glasses. David helped, and we worked side by side in comfortable silence until the dining room was cleared. Feel better? He asked, pulling me into an embrace. Much, I answered, but this is just the beginning. What's next? I smiled, thinking about all the documents I had locked away. The evidence of their tax evasion, the proof of Richard's embezzlement from his own company, and Amanda's insider trading records. Next, I said, we teach them the true meaning of family values. The morning after the anniversary party, I sat in my home office, my real office, not the small desk Victoria had begrudgingly allowed me to use in the mansion's library. Multiple screens displayed my property portfolio, news alerts, and security camera feeds from the Thompson estate. I watched Victoria pacing in the garden, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly as she likely plotted her next move. My own phone had been buzzing nonstop since last night. Society women who had previously ignored me at charity events were now eager to do lunch. Amanda's socialite friends wanted to know if the rumors were true. Had the waitress-turned-wife really been the one to own the Thompson mansion all along? Your mother is trying to access the family trust, David reported, bringing me coffee, the proper way, unlike Victoria's passive-aggressive habit of serving me lukewarm tea in chipped cups. She's already called 3 different banks. I smiled, opening a folder on my laptop. The trust that was emptied 6 months ago to cover Richard's gambling debts? That should make for an interesting conversation. The security feed showed Amanda's Mercedes screeching up the driveway. She stormed into the garden, waving her phone at Victoria. I turned up the volume on the feed. They've frozen my accounts, Amanda screamed. All of them, even my private offshore one. Victoria grabbed the phone, her face going pale as she read whatever was on the screen. How did they find out about those accounts? Nobody knew about those accounts. I knew, I whispered, watching their panic unfold. I've known for 2 years. David leaned over my shoulder to watch. When did you figure it out? Remember that charity gala where Amanda got drunk and boasted about her foolproof investment strategy? She was too busy mocking my waitress uniform to realize I was serving at her table. It's amazing what people say when they think the help isn't listening. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. We need to talk. Privately? No, I texted back. We don't, but your SEC investigator would like to talk to you. Check your email for the appointment details. Moments later, Richard stormed into the garden, red-faced, showing his phone to Victoria and Amanda. The security feed captured their meltdown in high definition. She can't do this. Amanda was crying now, mascara streaking down her face. Daddy, fix it. You always fix everything. But Richard just crumpled onto a garden bench, his head in his hands. He knew exactly what I had on him. 3 years of meticulous investigation had led me to trace money trails, document every illegal transaction, and uncover the backroom deals. I had proof of his embezzlement from his own company, the insider trading he'd orchestrated through Amanda's accounts, and the tax evasion schemes he'd hidden behind offshore entities. I'd given them until noon to pack up their things, I told David. The movers arrive at 1 to put everything in storage. He raised an eyebrow. Everything? Everything that actually belongs to them, I clarified. Which, after the forensic accountants trace the source of funds for each purchase, won't be much. Victoria showed up at my office door, trying to retain some semblance of dignity despite the smudged makeup and trembling hands. We need to discuss this like civilized people. I gestured to a chair. Please sit. Would you like some coffee? I've learned quite a bit about proper service over the years. She remained standing. This vendetta is childish. After everything we've done for you, everything you've done for me, I interrupted quietly. Let's go over the facts, shall we? You called me a gold digger at my engagement party. You forced your son to make me sign a prenup. You spent 3 years belittling me, mocking my background, and treating me like a servant in my own home. Your home, she sputtered. This mansion has been in the Thompson family for. This mansion, I cut in, was built by your husband's grandfather using money he embezzled from his business partners. Would you like to see the documentation? I found it quite an interesting read. Victoria's legs gave way, and she collapsed into the chair. What do you want? Want? I smiled. I already have everything I want. The mansion. The evidence of your family's crimes. The power to destroy everything you've built on a foundation of fraud and theft. Please, she whispered, and for the first time in 3 years, her voice lacked the usual condescension. We're family. Family? I laughed bitterly. Now we're family? Not last night when you mocked my orphan status. Not last month when you told your friends I wasn't a real Thompson. Not last year when you excluded me from the family Christmas card. David stepped forward, his voice firm. Mother, you should go pack. The movers will be here soon. Tears welled in her eyes as she turned to him. David, sweetheart, you can't let her do this to us. We're your parents. Yes, he said, his voice unwavering, you are. And for 28 years, you controlled every aspect of my life. You chose my schools, my friends, my career. You even tried to choose my wife. But you chose wrong, Mother. You thought Emily was beneath us, when really, we were beneath her. Victoria fled the office, her sobs echoing down the hallway. By noon, the security feeds showed a parade of luxury cars pulling up to the mansion. Amanda's friends had arrived to help her pack. Richard's business associates were likely hoping to salvage what they could before the scandal broke. Victoria's high society friends were undoubtedly eager to witness the Thompson family's downfall firsthand. I watched it all unfold from my office, forwarding key clips to my lawyers and SEC investigators. 3 years of careful surveillance, gathering evidence while playing the part of the humble, grateful wife. The perfect revenge, served ice cold. The movers are here, David said precisely at 1 o'clock. And you'll never guess who else showed up. I checked the security feed and smiled. Charlotte Preston, Victoria's oldest friend and fiercest rival in society circles, was overseeing the movers with a noticeable sense of pleasure. She had been the one to recommend me for the waitressing job at her country club 3 years ago. The job that ultimately led me to meet David. What Victoria never knew was that Charlotte had been my grandmother's best friend. She'd helped me invest my inheritance, introduced me to real estate developers who mentored me, and watched me build my business empire, all while I served drinks to the same people who looked down on me. Should we go downstairs? David asked. Make sure they don't take anything they shouldn't. I shook my head, pulling up the inventory list on my laptop. The security team has detailed photos of every item in the house with documentation of their true ownership. Let them try to sneak something out. It'll just give us more leverage. Amanda made one final defiant attempt, trying to load a painting into her car. "This was a gift from my father," she protested when security stopped her. "A gift bought with stolen money," I called from the top of the stairs. "Would you like to explain its provenance to the FBI agents who are on their way to question your father? I'm sure they'd be very interested in how a mid-level executive could afford a genuine Monet." She quickly left the painting behind. By sunset, the Thompsons were gone. Victoria, Richard, and Amanda had moved into a suite at the Preston Hotel, Charlotte's final blow, making them reliant on her charity. Their accounts were frozen, pending investigation. Their reputations lay in ruins. Their precious family legacy had crumbled, revealed as a house of cards built on fraud and stolen money. I walked through the now empty mansion, which was truly mine in every sense. The rooms seemed larger without the weight of their pretensions hanging over them. David found me in the dining room, where just the night before, they had made their last stand as society royalty. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me. "Not happy," I replied. "Satisfied. There's a difference." "What now?" I smiled, thinking of the plans I'd been carefully making. "Now, we turn this mansion into something worthwhile. Maybe a home for aged-out foster kids. Give them the support my grandmother gave me. Help them create their own success stories. Mother will have a stroke when she hears about that. Mother will be too busy with her legal troubles to care. The SEC investigation is just the beginning. Wait until the IRS gets involved." Later that evening, as we sat in the garden where I had witnessed Victoria's meltdown earlier, my phone buzzed with a message from Charlotte. "Your grandmother would be so proud. You pulled off the longest con I've ever seen." "Not a con," I replied, "just very patient revenge." David raised his glass in a toast, to the gold digger who owned the gold mine all along. I clinked my glass against his, recalling all the times they'd made me serve drinks at their gatherings, to patience, preparation, and proper documentation. My phone buzzed again. "Amanda, likely intoxicated. You'll regret this. Family is forever." I showed the message to David, who laughed. "Should we tell her about the offshore accounts we haven't frozen yet? The ones she thinks are still hidden?" "No," I replied, sending the details to my lawyers. "Let's save something for next week. After all, revenge is best served in courses." The next morning, I had the Waterford crystal packed up and donated to a local museum. In its place, I set out the simple glasses my grandmother had left me, not as expensive, but earned through honest work and treasured with real love. Victoria's high society friends began calling one by one, quickly shifting their loyalties as easily as sipping their morning tea. They'd always suspected something was wrong with the Thompsons, they claimed. They'd never approved of how they treated me. Would I be interested in sharing the hospital benefit this year? I politely declined each invitation. I had more important things to do than play their games. The foster home wouldn't build itself after all. "You know," David said, reviewing plans for the mansion's conversion, "they never once asked why I went along with your plan. Why I helped you bring down my own family. They think you're under my gold digger spell," I teased, "or that you're worried about losing access to my money." He shook his head. "I helped because they needed to learn the lesson you taught me 3 years ago. True wealth isn't about crystal glasses and family names. It's about hard work, staying humble, and remembering where you came from. Even if where you came from was serving drinks to snobs. Especially then." I looked around at the mansion that had once represented everything I was supposedly unworthy of. Now it would become something truly valuable. A place of hope for kids like I had once been, alone but determined to succeed. The perfect revenge wasn't just taking their home and exposing their crimes. It was transforming their symbol of exclusion and privilege into a force for good. And somewhere, I knew my grandmother was smiling.